What's needed down in Baton Rouge? Caroline Fenton of Locked On LSU joining me here on the show. Kind of an important spring for the LSU Tigers. Brian Kelly going into year 3. I think making the playoff, that is an expectation down there. Going into spring football, before we come back to that, what do you think Caroline needs to be accomplished by the Tigers?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's strange because you would think when you lose the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and two of the best, if not the two best, wide receivers in college football, you would think there might be a little bit more concern about the offense, about replacing those positions, life after Jayden Daniels. But frankly, that's not really, at least for me or a majority of the LSU fan base, the number one concern right now because Garrett Nussmeier comes in. Well, he's been at LSU for the last 3 years. And frankly, if Garrett Nussmeier wanted to transfer last season, there would have been a lot of competitive Power 5 programs that would have gladly taken Garrett Nussmeier's assistance under center. So Garrett Nussmeier comes in. He's been waiting in the fold for the last 3 seasons. And then there's a deep and stacked wide receiver room. And the question is just who's going to be the one to emerge as that next Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. or that next Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. It's not a matter of if those guys are in the room, it's which guys are they? I think the biggest concern right now and what needs to be addressed as we go throughout spring practice and once the spring transfer portal opens up, it's the defensive line. That LSU lost Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo rather unexpectedly to the NFL draft. I know I at least expected at least one of them to leave. I didn't expect both of them to leave. And the clear-cut answer is frankly, I don't think is currently on the roster. So they just need bodies at the defensive tackle position. Looking at guys like Sean Washington, who transferred in from JUCO, originally was committed to Georgia. He comes into LSU. Can he take that next step forward from the JUCO level to the SEC? That's what we're trying to find out in spring practice. Deshaun Womack, a former 5-star recruit, defensive tackle, was a true freshman last year. Saw a little bit of work, but was sidelined with an injury this past season. Is he fully healthy? Is he ready to take that next step forward in his second year? So at least have some names and faces to take a look at the defensive tackle position. But overall, LSU just needs depth and bodies and options on the defensive line. That's the number one concern for me.
For LSU, they remind me a lot of USC. Scoring points hasn't been the problem. It's been the other side of the ball. And the other side of the ball doesn't have to be a world beater. You don't need Georgia or Michigan or, Alabama's defenses over the years. You don't even need to be like Utah out west or Oregon or anybody like that. They just need to be serviceable, competent. So new defensive staff comes in. You talked about the defensive line, but how else does that side of the ball, that coaching staff, need to attack their weaknesses from a year ago?
Everything, every way, as much as they possibly can. Like when you're talking about all these defenses, Utah and Alabama, like when we talk about historically great defenses, LSU is in that conversation. Like it is crazy to me. Like if you would have told me, LSU fan from 2014, 15, 16, when LSU was playing games, the 10-7 was the final score. When LSU was playing championship level defense but couldn't even complete a forward pass, if you would have told me that in 2023 the roles would have been reversed, I would have been shocked and floored. LSU traditionally plays great defense. It's known as DBU for a reason. But last year, it was like everything that could have gone wrong for that defense did. It wasn't lacking talent. Harold Perkins is one of the best linebackers in all of college football. He was a complete non-factor because he was put in a position that just looked awkward, frankly. He was put in a position, game one at inside linebacker, he didn't look ready or prepared for it. Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith, two guys that I just mentioned, two guys that I think are first-round talent in the NFL draft, but won't go in the first round because their stats aren't really popping off of the paper because they weren't put in positions to succeed. And of course, injuries are going to be a massive part of that as well, but just technically, the fundamentals for that LSU defense, it was out the window. They missed tackles. They were in the wrong places. Overall, the scheme was befuddling. Like everything that could have gone wrong last year for LSU's defense, it did. So now the big task is honestly kind of going back to the beginning. Let's go back to the basics. Let's learn how to wrap up. Like, let's learn how to tackle. Brian Kelly, just for example, for those who aren't familiar with this LSU football program, last year, LSU gave up over 700 yards to Ole Miss. 300 plus of those yards. This is per Brian Kelly. Over
That's not the
300
SEC that I grew up with, Caroline. It's just not. It's just not.
Like, this is this is Golden State Warriors football. But over 300 of those yards against Ole Miss came after broken tackles, came after missed tackles. So it's honestly just getting back to the basics, and it's fitting these players back into positions that they need to be in. Sage Ryan is one guy that I'm keeping an eye on, and over the last couple of years at LSU, he's had to play safety, he's played corner, he's played in the slot, he's played nickel. He's basically just had to play wherever he's been needed because there hasn't been a ton of depth at that position. Now, fast forward, you've got more bodies and you've got a defensive coaching staff that can figure out what he truly does best, and he can be in that role. So I think it comes down to having the players, having the depth, and having a coaching staff that puts these players in the right positions where they can succeed.
Offensively, it's hard to expect Garrett Nussmeier to, play at a Heisman Trophy level. So I think it's reasonable to expect that maybe the offense isn't quite going to be what it was last year. Won't have that next gear where they can consistently score 40 to 50 points. Still, it should be expected to be good. That's what the standard is down there. So ordinarily, if you had a new defensive staff coming in and you just lost a Heisman Trophy at quarterback, I think it's fair to temper expectations. But this is LSU, this is Brian Kelly, and this is year 3, and a 10-win season, in all likelihood, gets the Tigers into the college football playoff, whether or not they appear in the SEC title game. As spring football gets set to begin, the spring game is April 13th. Do you expect LSU to be in the playoff? Is that the standard for a successful year 3?
It's a difficult question to answer as we now expand into 12 teams, because I think all of us are looking at it like, oh, the jump from 4 to 12, that's massive. So the playoff should be the expectation. I think a 10-win SEC team gets into the 12-team playoff.
Have to. And
I think that another year, because LSU the last 2 years under Brian Kelly, 9 regular season wins with a bowl win, a 10-win total season. Brian Kelly has expressed, Garrett Nussmeier has expressed, the entire team has expressed, look, that's not good enough anymore, that we want to do more than just win 10 games and then find ourselves in a pretty good bowl game. We want to find ourselves in the college football playoff. So I do think, in a roundabout way, I do think that that's the expectation, assuming that 10 wins it's frankly not good enough anymore. And that's also considering that you lost the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. That's also considering that you're losing Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. That's also considering that you're losing 2 of your defensive tackles. But what LSU is returning and what LSU has proven that it can do in Brian Kelly's first 2 seasons, I think it's fair to expect that they take that next level. Because you say it might be unfair to expect LSU to score 40 points a game. Like, that's the expectation. This offense is going to look different because the run game last year, it was Jayden Daniels. The offense last year, it was Jayden Daniels. The love is going to be spread around a whole lot more. The run game is going to look different. I expect Mason Taylor, the tight end, to be a lot more involved in the passing game. But I still expect this to be an offense that can put up 35 to 40 points a game. I still expect this to be an offense that's putting up 500 yards of offense a game, because that's just, with this offensive line, returning its 2 anchors on left and right tackle side, you're returning 4 to the 5 starters on a Joe Moore Award finalist unit from last season. When you return as many receivers as you had this past season, when you go into Mason Taylor's 3rd year, when you have a quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier that, albeit doesn't have a ton of starting experience, hardly any starting experience, but is a veteran on this team and with this offense, I think those are all fair expectations.
The offense will be fun to watch in the spring game to see what receivers pop. How does Nussmeier look? But I, like many others, will be keeping an eye on that defense. And Caroline Fenton always keeping an eye on LSU. Locked on LSU on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Caroline, thanks so much for stopping by.
Appreciate you, Spencer.
So Northwestern was in a bowl game last year. Did you know that? Are they going to keep it rolling? We'll talk about that next.